All right, everyone, welcome to the Win Together podcast, very special edition called Into the Arena. We're going to go into the arena today with Jared, the crazy good clinician. Casey, how are you?
Doing pretty well, Shay. How are you?
So good to have you. And Shay, the crazy good coach here today. And the areas that we want to go into the arena, find ways to win together, talk about, getting connected again when you're disconnected in your life or with someone really important or relationships that really matter. And today we're going to talk about something around creating something new versus trying to fix something that isn't working. So that really deals with, and Jared, you're the clinician, so you're gonna help me kind of put it in the right terms. But it's really around, if you keep on trying to go back and fix the old relationship, you're gonna keep on having those same breakdowns. And really the way forward or reconnecting is agreeing to create something new to move forward to that's worth fighting for and giving up things for to have.
Yeah, we have these family dynamics, these friendship dynamics that have lasted for years, months, and they tend to stick. So, in just kind of a simple example, if you ever go to like Thanksgiving, which is coming up, and you show up at Thanksgiving and you see someone you haven't seen in, I don't know, a year or two, and they tend to treat you kind of the same way that you were when you were last with them. But you've been gone for a year or two, and a lot of things have been different and have changed in your life, yet you still kind of fit in pretty quickly to the way, good or bad, that dynamic relationship is. So we have to look at, A, are you satisfied with those relationships, and B, are you willing to do something different?
Especially when it's unhealthy and you're experiencing a really painful or experiencing an acute amount of suffering because somebody you really care about is using, or some of the habits or relationships or triggers around them when they used to use are still coming up and affecting that relationship, and you keep on putting each other back into a space that neither of you want to be in, that's not workable, and you're not feeling like you're growing or moving forward.
Yeah, that space it wears you out. It taxes you. It creates resentments and frustration. And we heard just recently at Arena Talks, parents talking about how they just feel drained. They just feel tired. They just feel worn out, and they want their relationships to be more fulfilling and more rich and be able to actually communicate, which some of the things we addressed in our last cast. But really, are we willing to do what it takes to create something different? And I know sometimes it's a lot to ask when you already feel drained, you're already feeling low, and you almost feel like giving up on a relationship. But we're not talking about, fixing the old. We're talking about creating something new.
Well, I think in the moment, that is the hardest thing to ask somebody to do. I think that's the ultimate ask, because in that moment, it probably seems like the most impossible thing to do is, for a period of time, suspend all the suffering and the hate to create something new, which means you're going to have to give first, which you probably feel like you're way in the negative and don't have anything to give.
No, you may not feel like you have much. And part of this that's nice is when someone does start doing well in recovery, in early recovery, families and friends can start to feel a little bit of a buy-in. They can start to feel like this person's changing, and I can see it, but I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yep.
When it wasn't go back to the old pattern. And that's one of the hard pieces is stop waiting for that. This is the time that you really need to rally your support. It's all that energy you've been holding in and that you've used in other ways. This is the time to really start to create and allow that for that new space to be there for your relationships.
A lot of times what starts coming up is fear, apprehension, expectation that it's going to go the way it has been in the past. And I've observed and learned firsthand that if you approach it in a way of fear of that happening, that you're attracting that. What you resist persists, and what you're not going to happen will actually happen. Where if you're coming at it of a place of curiosity or learning and say, okay, I've seen this now, unfortunately, 50 times. What's going to happen? You can kind of map out, if this happens, then this will happen. If that happens, if I withdraw or if I give encouragement, they're going to, reject it, or they're going to, ask for privileges that I don't want to give because they're doing so good and it's only been so little, and from my perspective, that you can actually start mapping it out. And when you start kind of saying, okay, I know what's going to happen, and at these points is where I need to choose to be different. It doesn't have to be right. You just have to choose to be different in those moments to get a different result. And when you're approaching it in the way of like experience, I learned these things in the past I want to apply now going forward, almost like you're experimenting. It takes a lot of the pressure off. You don't put all the emotion into it. And you're actually able to learn some and get some different results at those same junctures that have been not good experiences in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a willingness to try something different. In systemic thinking, if you change any one area of the system, it affects some other area of the system. And it doesn't matter necessarily that you're trying to directly change one thing today. Maybe we can't talk about a certain issue with this person yet, but we can spend some quality time with them now. And they allow us to do that. And in that space, because we're sharing that quality time, we're bonding, we're engaging, we're giving something different to this system that before was just closed. Well, you're either in or you're out, or it's just going to be this way, period. All these, these definite statements that this is how it is, those are blockers. They block a system from changing or from having an opportunity to grow into something different.
So when the blockers come up, a lot of times they're your favorite blockers because you know them. And unfortunately, what we, as beings who have a body that craves homeostasis, we like it when those blockers come up because then we know how to act or what's going to happen, and we, even though it's unhealthy or dysfunctional, we'll allow that to happen. When you decide that you're going to create something new with this person and move forward, there's uncertainty, and so you don't have those favorite blockers coming up, and you may be tempted to use them or allow the other person to throw them up. But it's in the space of uncertainty and possibility that you're able to create something new that actually pulls you forward. And I don't think there's any... You shouldn't be shaming or blaming yourself for using blockers or allowing them to be used in a relationship, because they come up. They just are. And when you stop putting like a bunch of meaning into it and say, okay, that's just not what I want. I want something different. And you take a lot of the emotional... the emotional charge out of them, you're able to solve your problems and not look at the person as a victim or a villain or whatnot.
Yeah, and we can look at this even if you take addiction out of the equation. We can call those very hard problems. And we look at just say in an everyday marriage, there's hard problems, there's really hard problems, and there's small problems. And if we look at a healthy marriage, in healthy marriages, there's going to be disagreements. There's also going to be resolutions. There's going to be compromises. There's going to be flow of communication. Well, in an unhealthy marriage, you may have someone who is going to put up a really strong wall and just plant their feet and say, I'm not going to change until you change. And that can last until the marriage is over. It could last days, weeks, months, years. I had a good friend of mine who his marriage lasted until, it was like 4 or 5 years of that, just straight, of nonstop blocks of brutal. And then a partner might try to do a bit of affection and show up and a card or some flowers or make a meal or do something, and whether you receive that or not creates something different. Now this is just one example, but if we're willing to allow these bids of affections to translate to our loved ones in recovery or with whatever these hard problems are, it takes some humility and vulnerability and faith to try something a little different without an immediate result or an expectation of a result. And if anything, that you at least can feel a little bit better about what you're creating with this person instead of just getting stuck in those blocks all the time.
I think the biggest thing that stood out for me in there is without the expectation of something from the other person. So, it's really, it's important, or how do we... Well, we've kind of answered the questions. You're not creating a path back, to that place you used to have or used to be. You're creating a path forward where you guys are going to meet somewhere. And I think the biggest, from if you're the person who's got to give first, you're the person that's the healthy part of the relationship. laying off the hurt to God, to Heavenly Father, to Jesus, to Buddha, to the mountains, whatever that higher power is, laying that hurt off and letting some of that take some of the brunt of it, that is essential, I think. It creates a capacity inside you that, especially if you're a Christian, you give it to Jesus and you let him kind of carry that, and that creates a capacity in you to look at the person in a new way, a different way. The second part is you've got to clarify and say, I want something new with you. And I'm willing to do this, or I want to give this, and I'm going to let this go to have something different. And you're going to do what you can do whatever you want to do. If you want suggestions, I have them for you, but expect the other person to put in 50-50. That's not how it works. You put in 100%, and you create a place for the other person to put in 100% to have that different going forward.
No, I love that too. That perspective of if I give 100%, you give 100%, and if we both fall short, we're probably still going to have an A grade. But we're doing our best to what we can create there. Now, I think it's important to recognize too that sometimes the family member really wants to know the hurt from the past. They really want some resolution. They really want that pain to be understood, as well as the person
by the other person, right?
By the other person.
Sure.
Like, I need you to understand this so that we can move forward. That's true to a degree. But when you're building something new, you have some new materials. So these new materials might be learning some skills. I'm learning how to communicate better. I'm learning how to share what I need in this relationship. I'm learning how to do bids of affection, how to practice forgiveness. But there also is going to be some pieces you renovate from the old. So you may take some of those blocks that are on this, this antique building. They're still a gorgeous building there, but it's all rotting and corrupted. You have to chisel off some of the junk and reshape it and reform it and rebuild it into something new. And maybe that one block is that time we talk about the event that we both were sorry for. And now we can put that block into this new renovation, and we have a mix of the new and the old, making something beautiful. But we don't keep all the junk. We don't keep all the chip pieces and the broken parts and the sharp things, because those pieces, they're not going to fit in this new relationship. We have to let them go. Like you're saying, we have to give them to a higher power, let the pain go from them, but keep the beauty. We want to keep those lessons. We're not going to turn back into doormats in the future, because in this new relationship, we empower each other. We have adult relationships and friendships, and we allow space for each other to have flaws, but still respect and purpose.
So I don't want anybody to get kind of distracted about what are some common blocks that come up then as we're talking?
Resentment's a big one.
Yep.
Just feeling stepped on, overlooked, feeling used, abused, manipulated. A lot of the destructive patterns, even financial frustrations, loss, just things of that nature that have really caused a rift. Just anytime you feel like someone's taken from you and not giving you a fair pay.
Yeah.
Just unfairness, general unfairness.
I think also making sure you're not, if you're not asking for respect or a boundary or for somebody to notice you, or, there's a lot of times where couples will get to some point and think that, well, they're just supposed to notice me for things I want them to notice me. We've been together for 10 years. Why isn't it happening? That's a load of poppycock. It's not real. You've got to ask for it, and you may have been together for 20 or 30 years. You've got to ask. If they're not noticing something that you're doing that you feel is you're giving, you just ask for it. It's not being arrogant or selfish or egotistical. It's asking for validation and just noticing.
Yeah, and it's different for everybody how comfortable they are doing that. I feel like I'm a different species than my wife, and that's not a bad thing. But I don't read her mind as well as she might think that I do. And if she just tells me what she needs, we go a lot further. And then on the flip side, if I tell her what I need, we go a lot further. Where I'm just kind of indifferent sometimes. So this relationship pattern, however it's been working for you, if it's not working anymore, we need to do something different to make it more workable, and allow space to grow.
So I think a big thing for me is letting go of when the acknowledgement of the hurt has to come out, and letting them know that the expectation is, I want to be able to share with you some of the hurt, and it may not be today or tomorrow, but as we connect and become more, reestablish this new relationship, at some point I'm going to want to share with you what really hurt and what's really hard for me. That also may come in the form of triggers of saying, letting the other person know, like, hey, I'm getting really triggered right now when you're acting this way, or when you're being this way, or when you're doing these things. So like behaviors of like around money, behaviors around sleeping patterns, behaviors around connection, or the way you're using a phone, or using, not showing up for family activities or events. So I think being able to leave with a new relationship, you really create that possibility and say, okay, we're doing something new here. When you're not showing up to family events, that triggers me that you're off doing something that you should be doing. Or when you're on your phone, I'm talking to you, I just need you to say, hey, I'm checking this or I'm checking that. Like my wife and I, we've started doing way more proactive, like, hey, I just had to send this email and then I'm going to get back to you. And that helps so much without trying to go to some place or some direction that just creates disconnection.
Yeah, I mean, and I see it go too far the other way too sometimes where, all right, so I made a mistake, now you're in charge of my phone. You're in charge of my money.
Right.
You're in charge of this. And then it just starts to build up resentments and more manipulation and mistrust. So allowing space for, is this really worth it? Is this what I want to create? And if it is, if you answer yes, I want to create a relationship with this person, I want to keep this person in my life, then you have to allow trust both ways.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start giving trust both ways. I had a client this morning say, I really should start trusting more. And I just asked her, can you just take the word should out?
Mm-hmm.
And just say that for me again. I need to trust more. Yes, you do. Do it. And practice that. It's not something that just automatically starts someday or should. It's something that you start to do, even if it's in small amounts, and let that come back into your relationships.
Well said. And I think even if you were to put a time limit around some of those things, like, hey, I'm going to be in charge of your money just for 2 weeks, because the way you got here is by mismanaging it. So, and you've got to take some judgment out of it. You say, this is just so we can learn something new. Let's just look at patterns. If you put it back on the thing and not on the person, it takes some of the emotional energy out of it. Be like, okay, let's just track all your expenditures for a week or something like that. Very simple. Then I'm not taking over your money. Then it's not this definite relationship. I'm not, baby, it's all those things. It's like, let's put it on the thing and we'll be side by side facing the problem, not now putting the problem, wrapping it up into our emotions and into this relationship and going back in the same way we used to be.
Yeah, you don't want to turn that, well, what did you do?
Yep.
Let's look at that again.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to be careful.
You really shouldn't be buying that much stuff at a gas station. Don't you know gas stations, no shaming, no blaming, just data.
Yeah, I mean, do you really want to be the parent to your spouse? Or or continue this dynamic of he said, she said, or, this manipulative pattern? We have to look at going forward together, and as many times as you can, give them the responsibility back.
Yep.
Say, this is the responsibility that you own, and this is what I own, and this is what I will do, and my part is this, and be very clear. If we're very clear about what we're creating, and then the other person knows what you're creating, do you understand what I'm trying to create here? You have an opportunity to really, really build something solid. If you don't do it that way, kind of assume someone's picked up the ball over here and assume someone's done this over here, pretty soon it's just a sloppy mess. And what happens with sloppy messes, they turn back to default patterns.
Well said.
Default settings, and the computer's totally jammed up and there's a million apps running and it's shutting down. You reset everything and the default patterns are going to be those dysfunctional patterns that you've had that have been haunting you for years and years and years.
All right, so to wrap this up, I think, when we're talking about reestablishing connection and really getting out of some of those old blocks, those old patterns, and really building something new, is creating something worth fighting for, so something new that you're going to move forward to. Being clear about what that is. Being clear about what you're fighting for. Identifying some of the blocks and ways you would slide into an unhealthy communication or dialogue. What else?
I think that's kind of the basis, and just being willing to learn and be vulnerable in that relationship and be willing to allow trust in that relationship and to keep that at the forefront, that we're creating something here. And as those old things do come up, be willing to work through them, but don't keep a tally.
Yep.
We let go of the junk. We let go, let God, or let go, let your higher power, and allow for this established entity to grow. It's going to be a baby little tree.
Scorekeeping does not take care of resentment. Scorekeeping actually kind of engenders that, so we don't scorekeep.
Nope. And if you allow this relationship to grow and grow, it's going to get stronger and stronger. And that little baby tree will grow and eventually be a thick oak.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't give it a chance, you don't do these things different, then you're going to be stuck with the dysfunctional patterns. You're going to be stuck with the things that you're full of resent with. And you'll likely lose that relationship or lose that life.
So, and this is all about how you show up in the relationship. This is not about getting the other person to do these things we talked about. These actually apply to you, the listener, right now. This is how you do it, independent of anybody else in this entire world. I think, when you're going to lay off some of your pain to a higher power, it doesn't just come off with just laying it off and putting it on them. You've got also at that same juncture make a commitment that you will be different, that that extra space that creates, you will use to become a better Christian or a better person or a better father or a better brother or whatever it is.
Well said.
Okay. Everyone, this is Jared, the crazy good clinician, Casey, and Shay, the crazy good coach, wrapping this up, this special edition of the Winning Together podcast of Into the Arena. Cheers, everyone.